Okay, good evening. My name's Dr. P. Dominique Padurano. I'm the founder and president of Crimson Coaching, which provides academic tutoring, test prep, and college counseling to students worldwide. Tonight's talk is called Choosing the Right Courses in Middle and High Schools for Highly Selective College Admissions. So welcome. Just a little bit of background about who I am. I'm a former high school teacher, and I started Crimson Coaching in 2014 so that I could work more directly with students and families in things like tutoring. I used to be a history teacher, and it has since branched out to things like SAT and ACT. And as I mentioned before we started, lots and lots of college essays, especially this time of year. A lot of times people ask me, why did you name your company Crimson Coaching? As you can see from the mats of the photograph and the diploma behind me, they are crimson, that kind of deep red color. And that is the color of my alma mater, Harvard. And because I am a Crimson and I also coach students to achieve their full potential in school and in life, I named my company Crimson Coaching. I created this talk because I have definitely spoken with more than one parent who has lamented to me that their child has been kind of blocked out of highly selective college admissions because they didn't take the right courses. And lots of times being able to take the right courses gets started way back before high school, as early as 8th grade. And I felt that this is such a shame that I really wanted to share the knowledge that I have in working with older students who are applying to college with families of 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th graders, so that you really have an idea of, as your children go through middle and high school, what to look out for, what courses they should be taking, so that when they do apply to college, they have the most options available to them. So our agenda for today, I'll be speaking for about 30 to 40 minutes. And during that time, you can feel free to throw your questions into the chat. I don't always, I'm not always able to see them or respond to them right away, but I will definitely get everybody's questions answered before the end of the evening. And once I'm done with my prepared remarks, we're a relatively small audience. You can unmute yourself and just ask me your question directly if you'd like to do that. Before we go any further, though, I would just like to thank everybody for coming tonight. I know that after the pandemic, we are definitely zoomed out, so I appreciate your coming to a webinar. Also, thank you to Kim Carletta for inviting me and allowing me to do this as a Zoom presentation. And finally, thank you to Orangeburg Public Library for sponsoring tonight's talk. So let's define our terms. What do we mean by a highly selective college? Well, first of all, you should know that out of the approximately 5,300 colleges and universities in the United States, the average acceptance rate for them all is 66%. So that's great. About 2 out of every 3 students who applies to any given college is accepted. Selective colleges admit between 40 and 80% of those who apply, and highly selective colleges admit fewer than 40% of those who apply. But because many students, when I look at their college list, and one of the things I do as a college counselor is not just helping students write the college essays, but also crafting college lists for students, because many of them often have many schools on their list that accept fewer than 10% or fewer than 20% of the students who apply. I've actually coined my own phrase. You won't find this phrase anywhere else on the internet, but I've coined the phrase, the most highly selective. And we'll get to that in a moment. But let's look at, out of highly selective schools, how many are there? The reason why they're called highly selective is because, believe it or not, even though I think 40% sounds like a relatively high number, you're accepting 2 out of every 5 students who applies, only 178 institutions in the United States fit that bill. 114 institutions only accept 3 out of 10 students, and only 77 institutions accept 1 out of 5 students. So we're getting into what I consider the most highly selective, 1 out of every 5 students. And so you could imagine that of those 77 institutions, I see that repetition quite a bit on students' list. 30 institutions accept only 10% or fewer of students who apply. I'll actually call not just these 10%, but also the 20% or fewer the most highly selective for this talk. So those 77 institutions, because those are the colleges that most students have on their list. And just to give you an idea of some of the acceptance rates of schools that you probably know, Harvard's rate was under 4%. Last year, it was under 4%. I think last year, for the spring of 2022, that would be for the class of 2026, it was 3.5%. Stanford's is 4%. Brown 6%, University of Chicago 6%, Cornell 9%. And I do want to just take a moment to hit pause and parse some of those numbers. So when you look at a school like Brown, for example, Brown's overall acceptance rate was 6%. But when you look at the difference between early action, which is November 1st, that deadline is November 1st, that rate goes way up for Brown, at least to 14%. But then when you look at regular decision, that deadline is January 1st. For Brown last year, that goes way down to 3.5%. So the 6% is overall, but for those of you closer to application time, for instance, 10th or 11th graders out there, you may want to really think about applying early, because generally applying early, the acceptance rates go way up for all colleges, not just Brown. So what should you be looking for what should you be taking if by the end of college, you might like to apply to one of those 77 institutions that accepts fewer than 1 out of 5 students that applies? Well, you should be roughly taking about 10 to 12 advanced placement courses. You should also plan on taking all 5 core subjects, which are math, science, social studies, English, and a foreign language, for all 4 years of high school. I'm very sorry to say that, because a lot of students hate one or more subjects, but if you are aiming for that top echelon, that's what you need. Now, some highly selective schools do admit students with many fewer than 10 to 12 AP courses. For example, Kenyon College, who has a 37% admit rate, its average incoming freshman took only 4.8 AP courses on average. University of Georgia, which is right at the limit between highly selective and selective, the average incoming freshman there took only 6 AP courses. And UNC Chapel Hill, which has which I would consider in the most highly selective range of 20%, will not give preference to students who take more than 5 AP courses, because they are aware of the crazy arms race of AP taking, where, if you look on TikTok or YouTube, you will see students who say, you know, I got accepted to Harvard by taking 23 AP courses. Well, not everyone can do that and maintain sound mental health. And so UNC Chapel Hill says, you know, we're stopping at 5. Okay. So I want to temper that 10 to 12 AP course guideline that I mentioned. However, I would say, you know, if you're looking at those schools, Stanford, MIT, Harvard, you know, I would say 10 to 12 AP courses is what you should probably be aiming for. So I'd like to zoom in now, in particular on one skill and one particular course. So much has been said and debated about, if you're in my job, about how important calculus really is. A lot of people think that guidance counselors and private college counselors like me overemphasize the importance of calculus. I'm just going to mute if that's okay. Because I can't concentrate with the background. There we go. No. Okay, Annie, I'm going to ask you to keep yourself muted. Thank you. Okay, I got to figure out who's unmuted. Annie, please keep yourself muted. Thank you. Annie, I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you can't keep yourself muted, because I can't concentrate with the background noise. I'm really sorry. Okay, thank you. Yes. So in my line of work, a lot of people will say, oh, it's only guidance counselors or college counselors, private college counselors, who think that calculus is important. And calculus isn't so important for students' ability to succeed in college. That may be right, but when you do look at a statistic like 94% of incoming freshmen, sorry, that should be freshmen, MEN, at Cornell University have taken AP Calculus, well, then it sort of begs the question, although it may not be super useful to college freshmen, those are the ones who are getting admitted. Now, it may be because those are already a self-selected group of students who do really well, but whatever it is, if you are looking for admission to one of those highly selective schools, then I'm not sure I want to leave that to chance. The other thing that I think is really important is the importance of reading. And this shows up, I don't have a slide for this, but I can just say that anecdotally, as an SAT coach, it is really apparent to me that students' ability to maintain focus over an extended period of time is really diminishing. And I think, we could debate as parents and educators why this is happening. It's probably a combination of increased online time as well as the pandemic. Nevertheless, I think for students who are readers, those are the ones who are able to really stand out, not just on tests like the ACT and the SAT, but also very much more importantly, I think, in courses that are very reading dependent, courses like AP US History, which I taught for many years and which exam I graded for almost 20 years. for courses like AP Literature. And even, quite frankly, the ability to read critically and pay attention to details in writing is even important on the math portion of the SAT. I can't tell you how many kids I've tutored who, after they look at a practice test that they've taken, they said, oh my gosh, I thought that said most likely, but when I was taking it, the test, it said least likely, or I didn't understand. I was just looking to solve for X, but they really wanted to know what 8X minus 7 was. So the ability to read under pressure is something that is certainly difficult to develop, but I think the first step is reading a lot. And unfortunately, too few students, if you only start reading in 11th grade, it's way too late. So that's why I'm bringing this to you. You know, if there are any parents out there of 6th, 7th, 8th graders, get your child to start reading lots of different nonfiction and fiction, and have them be reading all the time, because that is really going to help them in preparing for highly selective college admissions. So middle school courses and grades are really, I believe, the big key to admissions to the most highly selective colleges. So most students need to be taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade in order to be able to take AP Calculus in 12th grade. Because a sample math progression might go like this: 8th grade, Algebra 1, 9th grade, Geometry, 10th grade, Algebra 2, 11th grade, Pre-Calculus, 12th grade, AP Calculus. And I would also say, by the way, this doesn't just set up the student in terms of their coursework for highly selective college admissions. It also sets them up for when they can take the ACT or SAT. If you've taken Algebra 2, you are ready to take the SAT or ACT. So that means if you've taken that course in 10th grade, you can now take the SAT or ACT in the summer after 10th grade, thereby freeing up your junior year for what are probably the most difficult courses you've taken so far in high school, and by far the most important grades you're going to get that will show up on your transcript that will get sent to these highly selective colleges. So I can't overstate the benefit enough in terms of the test taking piece, as well as the coursework piece of getting accelerated in 8th grade. So in short, it's not just 8th grade that matters. It's your grades in 6th and 7th grade math need to be strong enough so that you can get accelerated into high school math in 8th grade. And I know this sounds crazy for you to be thinking about college admissions in 6th grade, but unfortunately, if you're not on this quote unquote track for math, in many ways you may be missing the boat. So if you're younger than 8th grade now, or if your child's younger than 8th grade now, you want to verify that the high school your child intends to attend offers AP Calculus. First of all, if they don't offer AP Calculus, we'll talk about that possibility in a moment. You also want to make sure that your grades are high enough in 6th and 7th grade to get put into credit-bearing Algebra 1 in 8th grade. And so in New York State, by the way, that would be for that course ending in a Regents exam in June. You also may need to advocate for your child to get put into this course, especially if their grades are not at the top of their class. And we'll talk about, I would never suggest pushing a child into a class that they are not ready for or unprepared for, but we'll talk about other ways you could prepare your child for 8th grade Algebra 1 in a moment. The big way would be seeking the external help now, if that's what it takes. And, look, you could get Khan Academy if your child is a very self-directed. But if they're not already getting high grades in math in 6th and 7th grade, chances are Khan Academy might not be enough. And I really do believe that a little investment for tutoring now while they're in middle school to get them up to that bump of 8th grade out into Algebra 1 in 8th grade will really pay dividends in their college admissions rate later on. If your high school does not offer AP Calculus, then, and again, this is, of course, if highly selective college admissions are important to you, I would consider having your child enroll into a local high school that has more AP options, because AP Calculus is sort of a standard in the math AP world, or getting them into a boarding or day school that does offer more rigorous coursework, if that is available to you. If you're in or past 8th grade now and you're worried about, oh man, I missed the boat, I didn't take Algebra 1 in 8th grade, what can I do? Well, I do think you can catch up to your peers in a variety of fashions. First, again, you can get tutored to learn that material. And a lot of people would think that's not possible. It's very possible if you have a tutor who knows what they're doing. I'll just give you an example of a boy I worked with. He was in 7th. This was a little bit different. He was in 7th grade, but at a 3rd grade math level in a school for students with disabilities. And his mom wanted to put him into a mainstream school for middle school. And so that meant that we needed to catch him up to 7th grade math in about 6 months or so that he could enroll in 8th grade with his peers. And we were able to do that. Now, this boy, I'm happy to report, mom and I are still in contact, even though he doesn't need tutoring anymore. He's getting A's and B's in algebra and geometry all on his own now. So a lot of times, when you catch the problem when the student is young and you give them the fundamental skills and boost their self-esteem, because this boy had been told for many years that he was stupid, which is really just breaks my heart because he's definitely not stupid. When you can turn that around for a kid in middle school, oftentimes you get them on the right track for high school. Another way you can catch up or move ahead in this case is summer school. Not fun, but it's a possibility, and also probably free if you're in public school. You could also take a community college course. And often, if you can just take the Regents exam in August, January, or June to demonstrate that you are competent in whether it's Algebra 1 or Geometry or Algebra 2, whatever it is, then you can enroll in the next course in that sequence that I was talking about before. So in terms of other things, we're going to shift away from the calculus now and just talk about other courses to consider for the most highly selective colleges. You really should consider your potential major when choosing your courses. So for example, if you want to go to a business school, take AP Calculus, maybe economics. If you want to go to medical school, take physics, again, AP Calculus. You might also consider emailing the department head at the school you want to attend, as well as an admissions officer, and ask them, what do you think would be the most advantageous high school course that I could take? If your school does not offer 12 AP courses, and many schools do not, and there's no shame in that, you want to just make sure that you're taking the most demanding course load offered. So if 5 AP courses are all they offered, you take all 5, okay? Some non-AP courses can also be more demanding than courses with that AP designation. So for example, in the science track, AP Environmental Science is known to be, like the most easy AP science course there is. Regular physics, which has quite a bit of math in it, is more challenging for most students than AP Environmental. Another thing you could do is take online IB courses, which stands for International Baccalaureate. You could take college courses, or you could take dual enrollment courses, which are courses offered by universities for college credit, but then all taught at the high school level. And those high school students, teachers, are trained in how to teach that course. You can also take AP courses either through online high schools. I'm actually tutoring a boy right now who lives in Arizona, and he goes to a totally online high school through Arizona State University. You can take AP courses through massive open online courses like edX.org, and also accredited programs like the Center for Talented Youth at Johns Hopkins University. So what kind of grades do you need in these courses for admissions to the most highly selective colleges? Well, for regular level courses, you definitely need A's or in the 90s. For AP courses, a B is usually fine for most highly selective courses, colleges, and that is colleges that take fewer than 40%. And a B in an AP course is preferable to an A in a regular level course. However, for admissions to the most highly selective colleges, that under 20%, those 77 colleges and universities that take fewer than 1 in 5 students, you'll need an A even in an AP course, okay? I would say that if you are in an AP or honors course that is causing your grade to dip into the C range or into the 70s, that's the time when you really want to switch back into the regular track, because there's a lot of downsides for that. First of all, that course is probably taking up so much of your time that it's going to start drawing energy and time and focus away from all of your other high school courses. Second of all, it's not good for your self-esteem if you're the type of kid who's aiming for that high level and you're now getting C's. So that's not going to help you in any, and unfortunately colleges won't really look very kindly at courses in that have grades in the 70s or in the C level. So some questions that frequently get asked about highly selective college admissions. Can I drop one of the 5 major subjects, again, which are math, science, English, social studies, and foreign language? If you've had, for example, AP foreign language before your senior year, then you might be okay dropping down to do a different AP in your senior year, but you really should use the 250 word space on the Common App to explain that, right? And a lot of students can wind up taking AP foreign language because, again, they've been accelerated in foreign language in middle school, okay? Can I take classes I enjoy if I've got to take all these AP courses and the 5 major subjects all 4 years? Yes, of course you can, and you should. However, you're probably not going to have many free periods in your schedule in order to do so. So what might that look like? Well, if you've got 5 major subjects, that's taking up 5 periods. You've got 1 period where you've got probably some combination of PE and health, another combination of arts and computer, and then in 1 period, you can fulfill your passion if we're dealing with an 8-period day. So I'm going to stop here. I realize that there might be lots of questions out there. So I do just want to kind of encourage you to ask questions and to let you know that, there's no one formula that is right for, you can't say like, oh, Dr. P, just tell me what courses to take so I can get into Yale. It doesn't really work that way. But if you follow these guidelines, you certainly have a better chance. And I would just remind you that the most important aspect of getting into any college is the rigor of the courses that you're taking and your grades in those courses. Those factors are more important than SAT, ACT scores. They're more important than the essay. They're more important than your letters of recommendation and your extracurriculars by far. So, that's why thinking about the courses you are going to take really is quite important, especially for getting accepted to those highly selective colleges. So, questions?
I have a question, which is, would you please repeat what you just said about which factors are much less important than rigor and grades?
Sure. So the elements of a college application, and by the way, I just gave a talk on this last week, and the recording is now up on my website. So you can see my website address there, crimsoncoaching.com. You can go to that. It's called Introduction to U.S. Colleges, Universities, and Applications. And it's intended for people who perhaps didn't grow up in this country, parents who didn't grow up in this country, but it's really an excellent introduction for any parent. So the elements of a college application now are your grades, your coursework. Those are the most important factors together. Then your essay, your SAT, ACT scores, which are, of course, optional. I don't advise not taking it, but you have that option. Your extracurriculars, sports, clubs, whatever. Your teacher recommendations and your counselor recommendation. So the grades and the rigor of the coursework are by far much more important than any of those other factors that I just mentioned.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Would you please tell us again on your website the title of Introduction to U.S. Colleges?
Sure. You know what? I'll actually put the URL right in the chat now so that it's basically right there. as soon as you log on to this page. So give me just 1 second to type in, and I see that there's actually another question in the chat. I'll get to that in one moment. So it's crimsonccoaching.com/upcoming-classes-workshops. And if you click that link, you'll see like the YouTube video right at the top of the page. And that's the one that gives you like a good background to colleges and applications today. So I have a message that is asking me, is it better to take a course related to your high school major or rather an AP course? So, I mean, generally kids are not majoring in high school, right? They're majoring in subjects, meaning starting to specialize in college. So I would say that, it's always better to take an AP course in anything. Now, if you can also take an AP course in the area in which you might like to major, so AP literature for a kid who wants to major in English, AP calculus for a kid who wants to major in business or medicine or any STEM field, right? That would be great. So I don't necessarily think it should be an either or, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense to the person who sent that message to me. Any other questions? Just out of curiosity, what, if you'd like to put into the chat, what grade are most of your children in? I'm assuming that most of you here are adults, but if you are a kid, put your grade into the chat, because this is only the second time that I'm giving this course. Okay, so we've got a 9th grader, an 8th grader, a 10th grader. Great. Those are all great grades to be thinking about this. 10th, good. 8th, great. Yeah, so you 8th graders, you definitely have some time. The 10th graders, I would say, since you've already chosen and are in those 10th grade classes, you don't have that much time to course correct, but you certainly, definitely want to think about your 11th grade courses very, very carefully, because that will be the most recent, because in my experience now, the vast majority of students are applying early because they know that there is such a bump that you get when you apply early. It's much likelier that you will get accepted to any given college if you apply early. And so basically, they don't have any grades from 12th grade when you're applying early. So those junior year grades have got to be really, really solid. Great. Oh, so grandkids are in 8th and 5th. That's great. Especially the 5th graders got a lot of time. Awesome. I have a question here to me directly. Is it healthy to consider an advanced class or AP, even if it requires the student to get a tutor for additional support? Well, this is what I think is that, first of all, everything that I'm mentioning now should be never, the importance of all this should never supersede a kid's mental health, because we are right now in an epidemic of mental health crises among students right now. And I'm a big believer that nothing is worth a kid's mental health, because I can't tell you this year, and again, I can tell you sort of from in the trenches, I have never had so many students in all my years of, and I've been coaching kids writing college essays now for 8 years. This is the only year where I have had more than one student write about a mental health challenge, either of themselves or somebody else. And this year I've had, I think, 3 or 4 of them write about it, because this year's senior class were freshmen when the pandemic hit. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to be seeing mental health challenges on in through at least the next 5 years, as kids who were sort of like even in elementary kind of get into their teenage years. And so they should never get so upset about a course that it makes their mental health suffer. However, if tutoring is in your family's budget and it's not making the child depressed or anxious, then sure, I think that is great to give your child that leg up. I would also say, though, that then you probably want to make sure that that AP course is in a subject they enjoy, right? So if they hate science, don't force them to take AP Bio, right? If they're more of like a humanities kid, then get them to take AP European History and AP Lit, right? It doesn't, and if that's what they need the tutoring in, look, you can like something and still not be great at it and need a tutor at it. I think that's fine. But I wouldn't get a tutor just to force them to take an AP course that they're going to hate the whole time they're in it, because they're going to spend a lot of time with that course and you want them to at least enjoy it. I hope that makes sense. Yes, great. Any other questions? Yeah, so the question is, can you restate the advantage of applying early? Does this include early decision and early action? So yes, when I'm saying applying early, I'm generally mean either early decision or early action. And for those of you out there who have younger children or younger grandchildren, as the case might be, generally, and I'm painting with a very broad brush here, generally early action does not bind the student to go to that particular school should they be accepted. And generally early decision does bind the student, okay? Generally early due dates of either applications, whether it's ED or EA, are November 1st. There's some that are November 15th. Very few. That one I actually just heard of today. There's, some early decision to, like, the second round deadlines that start December 1st. And then there's a second round one that is, in January, but generally, let's say November versus regular in January. Okay. If you have, I'm going to put actually a book into the chat if you haven't read this yet. And I highly recommend the book by Jeffrey Selingo, who's a writer for the New York Times. He covers education. His book is called Who Gets In and Why? A Year Inside College Admissions. And it came out in 2020, and I'm sure Orangeburg has a copy that you can buy or borrow rather, because it was a bestseller. Selingo has a wealth of information in this book, everything from the only real gains in SAT came from working with a tutor versus when you apply early, that's about the equivalent of scoring 100 extra SAT points. So, for example, a candidate who applies in November with an SAT score of 1200, that same candidate, if they apply in January, would need an SAT score of 1300. Okay, SATs are out of 1600. So that is quite a big difference. And this difference is even more demonstrated for girls, because unlike back in the Stone Ages when I went to college, when there were more boys applying to college than girls, now there are more girls applying to college than boys. And so the bump for early is even more pronounced among young women. So if you have a girl at home, and luckily girls are often planners, not always, but they often are, you want to encourage her to apply early. And so what this does is that, when you think about, gosh, we're putting in the application on November 1st, that really sets back the timeline of when you need to start. And so you, I think, can appreciate why I'm then recommending that people take their SAT after 10th grade, because that SAT will really often give you a great metric of where you should be looking for colleges. And if you're interested in kind of looking at other videos on this, on like, how to craft a good college list, again, you can go to my YouTube, which is youtube.com Crimson Coaching, and I have videos like how to craft a balanced college list, which will kind of show you how to do that. But the first step is that SAT, which again is much easier to take once you have Algebra 2, which is easier if you've had it in 8th grade, Algebra 1. Other questions? A long question, but I'll read it out loud. In determining the best classes, how much consideration should be factored in for the school itself? What are your thoughts on the below? Is it better to consider a less competitive neighborhood school environment that still offers AP classes and offers rigor, but much more limited, fewer language clubs and sports? I mean, yeah, I would say in general, look, colleges get a school report, right? They find out everything about your school, from the percentage of kids that are getting free lunch, which is a metric of the socioeconomics of the district, to how many AP courses are offered. As long as your child is taking full advantage of all of the AP classes that are offered there, and for example, language clubs, sports, etc., I think that's great. But again, if you are applying just to those 77, the most highly selective, that's where you might want to supplement through summer activities like, pre-college programs. Another type of activity that is getting sort of hot now are what I call impact projects. And again, you can go on my YouTube and find a video, a webinar that I did about impact projects, which are student-led extracurriculars, basically, rather than joining something at the school or joining a community service offered by the church or temple or Boy Scouts. The child's own authentic passions are starting a project. That is looked at as very impressive nowadays. So I would say, the sort of less competitive neighborhood school is fine, as long as you're taking full advantage of everything that it has to offer, as well as supplementing with other rigorous, perhaps intellectual activities outside of the school environment, whether that be summer courses or things that the student is leading themselves. Other questions? Great. Well, if you found this helpful, I recommend, I give about, during the busy season, I give about one talk a week. I try not to do much more than that. I recommend you can go on to my website, crimsoncoaching.com, and up on the homepage, you can sign up for my monthly newsletter. And when you do that, you'll basically get a very short article that I write and that can also appear on my blog, and a list of all the talks that I give that month. The talks themselves are always free, and usually the librarians let, whether I'm giving it on Long Island where I live or Westchester, whatever it is, you can sign up for those for free. And that's a great way to kind of stay in touch with the new topics, and I'm giving new talks all the time. Like I mentioned, this is only the second time I'm ever giving this talk. And of course the monthly newsletter, you can unsubscribe whenever you want. I don't share your email with anybody, and you can also I just lost my train of thought. Oh, and it does only come once a month. I don't spam you like every day with emails. I don't have time to do that. So any tips for the school interview or resources? I really don't. And that's sort of beyond this talk about college picking out courses. But I do have a talk on tips for rocking interviews for college. So if you guys want that, I would speak to Ms. Carletta at the library and request that they book me for how to rock your college interview. Any other questions about picking the right courses? All right. Well, thank you so much for thank you, Miss Carletta. That's sweet. So thank you so much for coming tonight. I know that it's a busy time of year, so I really appreciate you coming. It was great chatting with you tonight. Good night.